Hi, my name's Peter. I've been a protocol junkie now for 24 years. I don't really know where to start. I guess I'll start at the beginning. It all started when I got this tool, a protocol analyzer. Before then, life, the network, it was all a blur. Like, don't get me wrong, I went through the motions. I would install switches, connect servers, configure routers, but I don't think it ever really made any sense to me. Like, I maybe think it did back then, but it was so hard. And then I got this protocol analyzer, and suddenly everything became clear. It all made sense. I could see people's passwords. I could read their emails. I could see what websites they were on. It was amazing. It was like I was the king of the entire world. And I liked it. Now, don't get me wrong. I was a user. But it wasn't long before I became a supplier. You see, I wanted everyone to have this tool that I had. I wanted everyone to be able to experience the same thing and see the same things that I could see. And it didn't take too much longer before I realized that people would actually pay me to use this analyzer on their network so that I could help them to see all the things that I could see. It was amazing. But here's the thing. I had no idea what was around the corner. OmniPeek, the first 802.11 wireless analyzer. Oh, wow. I could now capture frames without ever connecting to a network. And as Wi-Fi grew, and more people around the world started connecting to wireless networks, they were all broadcasting their data into the air for me to capture. It was amazing. I could capture frames everywhere, and I did. At home, at the airport, at hotels, at conferences. Everywhere, people were giving me their data. It was amazing. And did you know? These frames, they're all around you. They're here in this room now. Would you like to see some? Yeah? Let's have a look. This is... Oh, look at those frames. Aren't they beautiful? They're just so majestic as they scroll past my screen. They tell me so much about what's going on in this world. You might not think they tell you that much, but let's just take a look at one of them. This is a beacon frame. Let's see what it's got to tell us today. Look, it's claiming to be WLPC passpoint. And it's telling us that it speaks with an American accent. It's got a US country code, that's right. And it supports 802.11 HT. It's quite impressive. It supports very high throughput. And even HE. That's quite impressive. What else does it tell us about its thing? We can see in here, it supports not just one spatial stream, not 2, not 3, but 4 spatial streams. And as we look through its beacon, let's have a look in its roaming. We can see that this beacon is trying to get you guys to connect to it. Even if you don't know you're going to connect to it, it's trying, it's saying, connect to me with a wireless broadband alliance profile, or maybe a Google profile. It is trying to encourage you to connect to it. So let's be honest what a beacon frame is, just for a minute. A beacon frame is a way for an access point to advertise its online dating profile. It's true. And clients, they do it too, you know. Let me show you. Okay. I'm just going to go to the packet I want here. So clients, they also have an online dating profile. And we see that in probe request frames. What's my client saying? It's saying, hey, I am a client which supports 802.11n HT. And I support one spatial stream. This is it. I'm a one spatial stream client. It's saying how, trying to give its public profile on its dating site. It also is claiming very high throughput capabilities. You're more interested now, aren't you? Also one spatial stream, but MCX race 0 to 11. So that's where we see the client. And APs can respond to that with their own public profile, as we saw in the beacon frames. Let's see what this AP has to say for itself. This AP says, hi, I'm MQTS2. That's its name. I speak with a sexy British accent. Yeah, I can tell you're all interested now. Absolutely. Transmit power of 21 dBm. And I support 802.11 HT. With 4 spatial streams. Do you want to connect to me? I can also support very high throughput and HE. And look at this. We can have a conversation using AES encryption. And when you connect to me, we'll do simultaneous authentication of equals. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, as any right-respecting client would do, they log onto its online dating system. We've got some authentication frames here. And they go, hey, AP, can I have a connection with you? And that's the association request frame. And it's really interesting because association request frames, you get all the same things. The client's now going to send the AP its profile and say, come on, let's go on a date. Let's have a connection. And here we go. We've seen the client before's public profile, and it sends its profile out, and it says a little bit more information this time. Hey, I can transmit at 21 dBm too. And I support 802.11ht, and I support 2 spatial streams. Hang on a minute. Did it not just say it supported 1? And now it's saying 2? Clients lie. All the time. You know, it's public profile. Hey, I like rock climbing. And then the AP says, oh, I like rock climbing, but I also like watching chick flicks. And then the client says, yeah, I like watching chick flicks too. See, isn't it wonderful of wireless protocol what you can see? But don't worry. I know you're out there. People who are trying to spoil all my fun. Yeah, you know who you are. Stephen Orr. Encryption. Wireless security standards. It's like you give with one hand and take away with the other. I'm not trying to cause any trouble. I just want to see what people are doing. But here's the thing. Even when protocols are encrypted, we can still tell an awful lot about what's going on. Let me show you. Here we have a trace file, beautiful packets. And if we look at the data packets, we're going to see that they're all encrypted. Just encrypted data. I don't know if you can read that, but I can't. The problem is, this was from a network where these voice phones, which I'm looking at, a conversation between 2 voice phones, were having an issue in a particular area of the network. The problem was, it was all encrypted. WPA3, it's WPA2 actually, but it was enterprise, ETLS. So I'm not decrypting these frames, but what can I see? Well, one thing to remember is that in a encrypted data frame, the header is still unencrypted. And there's certain fields in the header we can get information from. Things like the priority of what this frame is being sent at. So if I add a column up here so that we can see the priority, we start to get some more useful information other than just encrypted data frames. And to make my display a bit easier, I am going to go to my coloring rules, and I've got a little coloring rule for the 2 voice phones, so that all frames being sent by voice phone 1 are going to be blue, and all the frames sent by voice frame call 2 are going to be black. And now when I have a look at this voice call, what do we see? It might have been hard to see things initially, but look, all the black frames are being tagged as voice. All the blue frames are being tagged as best effort. There seems to be an issue with my end-to-end quaz going on in this trace file. We can actually see that the black frames if we look in our frame control and our flags, it says a frame from a station to the DS. This is going towards the network. This was the voice phone that I was wirelessly capturing the frames to. And then the other phone it was having a conversation with was on the wired network, and these frames, the blue frames, are coming from the DS. What was happening on this network was the phone was tagging the frames as voice, but somewhere on the network, when the frame from the other phone was coming back, the tagging was being removed, and therefore they weren't getting prioritized. You see, even when encryption is enabled, knowing how to use a protocol analyzer allows everything to become quite clear. And the thing with frames is, they tell me so much. But you know what they say about statistics? There's lies, dem lies, and statistics. And so let me show you that in another tool which I love, OmniPeek. I've got a protocol capture from a network here, and I'm just showing you a graph of retries. This line here, if it's hard to see at the back, is 15% retries. So most of my retries are around 8, 9, 10%. What would you say? Is there a problem on its wireless network if you've got about 10% retries? No. A few people shaking their heads? It's fine, isn't it? My retry is about 10%. That's about normal on a wireless network, I would say. The problem is they're having difficulties. So it doesn't seem to be a retry, but statistics. 10% of what is my question. Well, 10% of all packets transmitted on the network. Let's have a look at the protocol. 30% of all traffic on the network are beacon frames. Will a beacon frame ever be retried? It's a broadcast frame. Broadcast frames are not acknowledged, therefore they never get retransmitted. So what frames are we interested in? My data frames. So let me just select my data frames. I'm going to create a new window just with my data frames in. So here's my question. If I just look at my data frames, now I wonder how many of my data frames are going to be retried. Oh, the graph looks different. We've got 100% at the top, and very often, I'm getting anywhere between about 70 and 100% retries. Is there a problem on my network? Absolutely. So when you have wireless LAN controllers or management systems or AI saying you've got 20% retries as a statistic on a dashboard, what does that mean? Well, it depends whether it's 20% of what. Is it of all packets it's seen? Just data frames? Protocol analyzers allow us to see what's really going on and slice the data in whatever way we want. Let's take a look at some other things we can see. I'm just going to go to a very particular packet so I get to the right point in this trace file. Okay, here is a trace file. Wi-Fi is getting more complicated, isn't it? But when we look at the protocol, I sometimes think it can be easier to understand what's going on. So this is a OFDMA trace file. How does OFDMA work? Well, we're going to look at an upstream OFDM transmission. And that is when the AP splits the channel between, in this case, two clients, and then triggers them and says, transmit now. And it does that with a frame called a trigger frame. This is a trigger frame. And I want to point out some important little things inside this trigger frame. Inside a trigger frame, it's a control frame, and there is some user info. And inside this user info, you will see there's user info there, and there's another user info here. That's what we're going to look at. The first user info says, this trigger frame is for association ID 12. And we are going to give it an RU, resource unit allocation, of 65. And in brackets, that tells me it's a 484 tone RU. This is an 80 megahertz wide channel, and that is half the channel being allocated to this station. The second user info is for association ID in hex 3A. And it is going to also get 484 tone RU, but it's getting allocation 66. 65, 66. 65 is the first half of the channel, 66 is the second half. So we've allocated two chunks of the channel to these clients, and then we say, get ready, transmit. And then look what we see. Data frames. But if we look at the source address, we've got some that is from 8.242 and some 8.128. This is upstream OFDMA. These frames, although Wireshark has to put them in an order, are coming at the same time at the AP. Both in separate chunks of the spectrum. So we're going to start seeing things like this, and analysis is going to start to become a bit more complicated. Let me show you another thing which is of interest in terms of new protocols you're going to see. Okay. I'm going to look at a beacon frame from an MLO access point. And I'm just going to open up some relevant and interesting things in this beacon frame. Particularly, I want to show you the reduced neighbor report element, and we will also have a look at the MLO element. But why the reduced neighbor report element? Reduced neighbor reports came in, didn't they, with 811AX, and they tell us what neighbors to look at. So we can do out-of-bound scanning, and we can discover 6 gig radios. We can discover other radios of the same AP. But when we look at reduced neighbor reports now, in its target beacon transmission information, we can see there's an MLD, multi-link device parameters. And it tells us that this channel 11 radio, that's 2.4 gig, has a link ID on its AP of 02. Okay, so 2.4 gig has a link ID of 02. And then we've got channel 44, and it has a link ID of 0. Now, this frame is being transmitted on the 6 gig channel 101. So we've got a link ID of 0 on 5 gig, a link ID of 2 on the 2.4 gig band. If we look at the multi-link information element, we can see there's a link ID of 01. So the 6 gig has a link ID of 01. So it's given each of the radios in its AP a link ID. You get that? And then we have this multi-link device MAC address. This is the upper layer MAC address of MLD. So, and you'll notice it ends 083D. If we look at the BSS ID, that's 8040. That is the 6 gigahertz radio MAC address. And each of the other radios will have a MAC address, and then there's going to be a MAC address which links them all together, if you like, an upper layer MAC address that it's going to use. And that's what we call the MLD MAC address. So we have 2 layers of the MAC layer here. So as you think through all that information, let's have a look at the association the association requests. Let me go to the association. Here we go. And we'll try and talk through what we see here. I'm just going to collapse it all. Now here we have got the multi-link information. And we can see it's supporting enhanced multi-link single radio, which means when we look at the station profile, we can see that the link ID it's currently linking to is link ID 2. But it's actually, it's got 2 link IDs which it can connect to. So we can see that this, what it's offering is it's saying, okay, you can, I've got 3 radios and you can create a link with up to 2 different radios on its AP. And that's what it's going to do. So although it's going to associate on channel 101, it's actually going to create a link with 2 radios. And then it's going to be able to pick one or the other. Make sense? And all this information is clear inside the beacon frames, and you'll see the upper layer MAC address. Don't you think protocol's beautiful? I can see I've probably been talking too long. I should let somebody else share. I do apologize. Thank you.